Ladies and gentlemen, we got it.
I learned everything I've done.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Tear down this wall.
I can see Russia from my house. Man, go to the
Hello!
Hello, welcome back.
Welcome back to A Chicken in Every Pod. It's been a while.
Yeah, we're still, keeping it to one a month, but
That's
this
right.
really is practically the last day of the month.
Yeah.
But it has been an August.
Yes, it's been a long August. Long, hard, slow August. We're experiencing an incredible heat wave in the Los Angeles area. And I went back to school. Well, I started up at school again, and I'm teaching as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been busy. Been a couple busy little bees.
Your last term of your master's degree.
That's right. This will be the end of my master's, and then I'll be a master.
Be a grand master.
Formally. Yeah.
And and finally student teaching.
Mm-hmm. In person.
In the flesh.
In the flesh.
In the fleshy flesh. Kyle, can you tell me a little about what is the kind of the COVID protocol right now in these high schools?
Yeah,
in
so
LA.
For LUSD, we have to get tested every week, usually every Wednesday.
How does that work? Like you leave class and...
Yeah, so each week a different... for the teachers, we just go whenever we can. Mm-hmm. Which could be before school, could be during lunch, could be after school, could be during the prep periods that we have where we don't have classes. But for the kids, every week a different subject takes their kids for the day to get tested. So, I'm history, so last Wednesday it was History's Day. Mm-hmm. We took them around all day. This week I think it's math. They're going to take them all around. And so the kids get tested every week, we get tested every week. The results of our test come to a website called Daily Pass. Mm-hmm. And on Daily Pass, every morning we have to log in and get a pass to get on campus.
Wow. That
is tied to our negative COVID test results.
And you had a teacher in the room next door that was COVID positive, right?
I think she was COVID positive.
Okay.
Last I heard, it seemed likely she was going to be ruled COVID positive, but I don't know what the results were actually.
So it's really good to be doing those weekly tests.
Great.
At first I was like, this feels like very interruptive.
Yeah, it's
disruptive.
It's not too bad interruptivity wise.
But the wearing the mask.
The wearing the mask sucks. So we're still wearing the masks too. That's very difficult. You do get a little winded when you're up and trying to be energetic and talking about stuff all day. You can't see the kids' faces. You only know what half of their face looks like, which feels like you got the whole deal. But the lower half of people's faces really can change what they look like. There's been some kids that I'll think I know what they look like, and they'll pull their mask down to take a drink of water or something. I'll be like, "Oh, you look dramatically different than I thought." So, here's hoping that soon the FDA will approve the vaccine for people that are young, for teenagers.
POA, people of youth.
Yeah. And then there could be a vaccine mandate for the schools, which is much easier than a broad vaccine mandate, because schools already mandate vaccines. You have to have the MMR vaccine to go to school, public school. And then maybe we can all whip those face diapers off and spew shit at each other instead.
We also, in California, we're dealing with the Gavin Newsom recall.
That's right, recall watch. Do.
It's happening. Larry Elder being the main guy the Republicans want to take over, the front runner, but he's cringe, as the youth would say.
Yeah, he's super cringe. Larry Elder is not based.
No, he's not bae.
He's not bae. No, he sucks. He's got a lot of bad opinions.
He makes Gavin Newsom seem like what a guy.
Yeah.
Cuomo's out.
Cuomo. No mo.
No mo Cuomo.
No mo Cuomo. That's
thanks
deserved.
Cuomo for validating all Italian stereotypes.
Yeah, Cuomo really set back the Italian-American cause by decades.
Yeah, thanks, Cuomo.
Thanks, Cuomo.
Biden has Biden bungled Afghanistan pullout, as you probably all know. But you know, it's hard when you're also anti-war. And it's like you don't want, you know, we need to get out of there.
Yeah.
But you know, it seems like things have been getting a little sloppy, a little messy.
Yeah, they're slopping them up.
Trump got booed. Trump Watch.
Trump Watch.
Is he alive?
Yeah.
Spiritually?
No.
So he had a rally and he gave a, said like, you really should get the vaccine. I got it and it was great. And people started booing him.
Insane. He has totally lost control of his people.
Yeah, and Alex Jones was like, maybe Trump's not as smart as we thought.
yeah.
Just
great. I think he
great.
said that maybe Trump's kind of a dumbass. I think that was the actual quote. Right conclusion for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, just a little too late. What else I was looking at celebrity Halloween costumes, and there was a couple years ago, Katy Perry, her Hillary Clinton costume. It was this like very creepy appliance.
Atrocious.
And whoever she was with was Bill, and it reminded me of the new movie about the Monica Lewinsky scandal.
Oh, the show.
Who was it? Clive Owen?
It's Clive Owen. Yeah, the new it's the American Crime Story season.
Yeah, I feel like there's gotta have been someone that looked more like Bill Clinton out there. They should have cast what's his face from SNL. That was Bill Clinton.
Daryl Hammond?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like it would have been great, but American Crime Story, it's not about
the physical accuracy of the casting. It's about the performances.
Which has been the case since
since
Cuba
OJ.
Gooding Jr. as OJ.
I think Dennis Quaid played Clinton something.
He would be a good Clinton because he's got that like, hey, you kind of like me, but I'm skeezy, and like his nose shape.
He played him in that Special Relationship TV movie.
Was that about Monica?
No, it's about I think Stephen Frears is the director. He did a trilogy of movies. One was in theaters, the other two were on British TV about Tony Blair, where Michael Sheen plays Tony Blair in all three. The first was about his deal with Gordon Brown. His second was The Queen with Helen Mirren, that was nominated for a bunch of Oscars and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So it's got Michael Sheen as Tony Blair. And the third is The Special Relationship, which is about Clinton and Blair's relationship. And it's Dennis Quaid as Bill Clinton.
Oh, wow. I hope that Tony Blair kept his dress.
His blue suit. Yeah, so
freaky appliances, facial prosthetics. Look them up.
Amok.
Look at Katy Perry as Hillary Clinton.
And look at Clive Owen's Bill.
Look at Clove Iwan.
Clove Iwan.
He's what, British?
Yeah.
Anyway, they're taking our jobs. That's what I'm saying.
These 400s are taking our jobs. I think that's it.
I think that's all that's happened in the world. Do I have anything to talk about for me? It's a month till our cat Penny's birthday.
Right. So wish her a happy birthday on Twitter.
Yeah.
Just at the pod. Happy birthday, Penny. Should we get into it?
Yeah, so a departure from our very serious and important episodes about aliens. We're talking about the never-ending wars.
The never-ending worry.
Oh, I did not. The never-ending Wario.
Wars in the Middle East. We're talking about Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So, we're not going to talk too much about what's currently happening in Afghanistan.
It's changing every second.
Yeah, it's unfolding rapidly.
Yeah.
Where there's not a lot of clear information.
The last thing Biden said, which you thought was Biden threatening.
Yeah. Well, I got a news alert on my phone that's like, Biden warns that a terrorist attack is imminent in Kabul within 36 to 48 hours. And I was like really tired, and so I read it as like, Biden's throwing out threats to attack Kabul.
Based.
But I think we can start by talking about the current events a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of wrap back and talk about...
Wrap back.
We'll do like a wrap back.
A rap battle.
So, we're pulling out of Afghanistan, the United States, after 20 years. We are removing...
So I was 8 years old when we got into the war.
Yeah, I would have been 11 when we got in.
Wow.
We've been there for 20 years. It's the longest war America's ever been in. It cost $1 trillion, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Tens of thousands of deaths from it.
Of
Primarily Afghans.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily Afghans. Not a lot of American casualties in Afghanistan. Some, but not a lot.
Wow.
Which is, that the decision that led to that is part of the problem, probably.
Yeah.
And it's done. So Biden's been pulling Americans and, American allied Afghans out of the airport in Kabul. But the Taliban swept in very quickly, took over the entire country again. They're pretty much in charge. And now ISIS is attacking. ISIS and the Taliban are not fond of each other. They are probably going to now fight their own war in Afghanistan.
And the Afghan people are the ones that are fucked over the two of their fighting.
Yeah. So that's pretty much where it's at, right? As of right now,
And
they're having trouble getting everybody out. I had seen, this is not verified, but I had seen secondhand from journalists on the ground that some of the deaths that have been caused in the recent ISIS attacks were from U.S. troops opening fire into the crowds from which they came. So it's just a real shit show.
And that
on the ground.
That Kabul attack killed like 13 U.S.
servicemen.
So that was way more than Benghazi.
Benghazi was 4.
Yeah. So this is his
It's his Biden-Ghazi.
Ben Gatesy.
His Matt Gatesy.
Or yeah. And so it went from like conservatives being like, Biden, what are you doing by pulling out Afghanistan, to then and Democrats defending him, to then it being like, oh, this is going really badly.
Yeah. So I think that I'll editorialize a little bit. I think that it was probably poorly planned, but I also think that this was probably the inevitable result.
Yeah.
Not in the specifics. I think that more people could have gotten out safely.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could have maybe been less chaos, but in the overall arc of that, the U.S. was going to leave and the Taliban was going to immediately take back over. I think that ending has been predetermined for a long time.
Yeah. I think there were little, like, from what I'd read, like, the U.S. government was not very slick with how they were, or the military was, like, gave the Taliban a big heads up, basically.
Yeah.
And, by, like, saying,
They
posting...
gave them a list of people that they basically were like, we need to make sure these people get out of the airport of Kabul. These are Americans.
And they
they
put up job listings, too.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we're leaving, so these jobs are available. Like, just
And
really...
part of it is that they did expect the government that the U.S. military has been training and propping up for 2 decades. They did expect them to survive longer, I think. They expect there to be a bit more of a head start. And there wasn't at all.
And so Biden has, even though Biden, has rightfully been called a war hawk, I mean, he voted for the Iraq war, and, any chance he gets, he goes like, oh, we gotta stop the terrorists.
Yeah.
But he was actually pro pulling out of Afghanistan since he was vice president, right?
Yeah, he was famously a voice for caution in foreign policy in the Obama administration.
And I heard that Hillary was like, no, we gotta keep doing it.
The most famous example is that Hillary really wanted to overthrow Gaddafi, and Biden thought that would be a very bad idea. And Biden obviously is vindicated. And that was an awful idea. It led to Benghazi. So that's where the chips are right now, and they're going to keep falling. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be updates after we record this, after we post it, things that are going to make all of this irrelevant, probably. New developments. Mm-hmm. But that's where it stands right now.
Wow. So, being 8 years old when we went into Afghanistan, and just in general, me being here and not having much of a knowledge of this kind of stuff, like, where does this all begin?
I mean, when it comes to the Middle East, that's the eternal question, you know. So we could trace a lot of the influence of the West, at least in Afghanistan, back to the 19th century. Do you know where Afghanistan is in the Middle East?
No.
That's okay.
In the middle?
It's actually not in the middle. Afghanistan is pretty far east. It shares a border with Pakistan. And remember that Pakistan was only carved out of India somewhat recently.
Yeah.
Pakistan was a part of India. So for a long time, Afghanistan and India shared a land border.
And I was trying to figure out, like, in relation to what I know, how big Afghanistan is.
Yeah.
And what do we that, like, the population is basically equivalent to California?
A little bit less, I think, than the population of California. And size-wise, about as big as, if you go from, like, LA up to Salt Lake City, sort of, and draw a big circle, or a big oval, that's about the size of Afghanistan.
Wow. Pretty big.
It is big. It's a big country. And starting in the 19th century, the significance of it sharing a border at the time with India is that Britain had its eyes on Afghanistan. The British Empire took over India.
I want to colonize this.
Oh, let me get it.
Let me get it.
Oh, let me get
I
it.
bet they got tea.
Oh, ho, ho. I don't know why I turned into Jabba the Hutt.
I mean, that's good political commentary.
But so, Britain never really took over Afghanistan. They were never really able to. Afghanistan is a famously difficult country to invade and take over. In part because the northern regions are incredibly mountainous, full of cave systems that we're going to talk about a little bit. Very, very inhospitable terrain. And the people that live in Afghanistan, like the people that live in many places, don't want foreign countries to come in and take over. There was a period of time in the 19th century called the Great Game, which was a period when Britain and not the Soviets, because this was pre-Soviet, but Britain and the Russians were trying to both take over a bunch of the Middle East and stuff, and in general kind of be world empires in that region. And Afghanistan served as a really important buffer zone, because to the north of Afghanistan right now is like Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, countries like that are to the north.
Don't they have kind of Russian influence?
Well, they all used to be part of Russia. Yeah. They were basically spun off after the Soviet Union collapsed. But so during the 19th century, Afghanistan was a buffer state between British-controlled India and Russian territories.
Wow.
So it was like a really important geopolitical sort of thing. And then in the Third Anglo-Afghan War, like the 19th century, all European influence was like driven out of Afghanistan, basically. And it was running itself. Also, its border country to the west is Iran. So it's generally a very importantly placed country. That was 1919, sorry, the Third Anglo-Afghan War. And it became free of foreign dominance. It became a kingdom under King Amanullah in 1926. And about 50 years later, in 1973, there was a revolution, and King Zahir was overthrown, and a republic was established.
Okay.
And then, 5 years later, there was the SAR revolution, S-A-U-R, in which a communist state was put into place, a socialist state.
Wow. And so this is not, isn't a communist state sort of inherently irreligious?
Yeah, certainly structurally secular.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, actually, nominally, Afghanistan was communist basically until the fall of the Soviet Union, but it fell into civil war relatively quickly. So, this revolution is what presaged the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s. Basically, there was a bunch of Mujahideen fighters who were largely religious, conservative, guerrillas, basically, in the hinterlands, the mountainous regions, that were rising up to fight the communist government. The Soviets came in to defend the communist government, to fight against the Mujahideen. Now, the Mujahideen were fighting against the Soviets, right? That meant that they were our friend at the time. And so the CIA and the Reagan administration
America was like, great,
we love
go
this.
kill him.
We love this for you. We gave them a bunch of money and a bunch of guns and a bunch of weapons. We trained Osama Bin Laden for the same purpose, to fight the Soviets. in the Middle East.
We love that we'd rather have you be religious extremists than be communists.
If that ain't 20th century American foreign policy in a nutshell.
Oh my God.
So eventually the Soviets, they totally collapsed. They arguably broke their empire over Afghanistan.
When was
just
this?
like the British did, and just like we are. This was the 1980s.
Wasn't Iran was also very, like, women could dress more modern.
Iran was that way in the 60s.
In the 60s.
And then they had basically a reactionary revolution, like a counter-revolution, that installed the Ayatollah system. Iran at this time was in a war with Iraq. They were fighting each other. And that's when we armed up Saddam Hussein to fight against Iran.
So cool that we were so involved.
Yeah.
And
both of
given
those
all of our
decisions
weapons.
did not come back to haunt us at all. By 1996, most of Afghanistan was controlled by the Taliban. Now, the Taliban, which in Pashto, I believe it's in Pashto, means students. Talib is student. So Taliban are the students. They are very reactionary, violent, religious fundamentalist group. Many of them, so they didn't grow directly out of the Mujahideen, but they did. You know what I mean? Like, the Mujahideen didn't become the Taliban, but pretty much everybody of note in the Taliban was trained as part of the Mujahideen in the 80s.
And were they still sort of on the outskirts of the town, like in the mountains?
That's like their base of power, is the mountainous regions, in like the Hindu Kush is in Pakistan, but in similar regions, right? Yeah. So the Taliban takes over. And this is like a period of civil war, basically, right? That they win. It's not just as simple as that they come and take over. Since the time the Soviets leave in the late 80s up until the mid 90s, the country's in civil war. The Taliban win. They control the government for about 5 years.
The Taliban win, and they still have American weapons.
Yes. They're no longer American aligned, but they do have all the held over weaponry and training from the 80s, from the CIA and the Mujahideen. So the Taliban's in charge, and they allow another CIA asset, Osama Bin Laden, to set up a base of operations for Al-Qaeda in northern Afghanistan.
So who was Osama bin Laden? What was his deal?
Right, Osama bin Laden is the black sheep, formally speaking, of the Bin Laden family. The Bin Laden family are one of the richest families in Saudi Arabia.
And they're good friends with the
Bushes.
The Trumps and the Bushes.
Yeah, closer with the Bushes than the Trumps for sure.
I just know that Ivanka, I think, is close with
one of the Sauds. Yeah.
Yeah. They like vacation together.
Yeah, but the Bush in the 80s, the House of Saud and the Bushes did lots of business together, and the Bin Ladens were very close with the Bush family. So Osama was not lockstep mainstream with the family from a young age. He was more religious, a little more extreme. There is some question about how much of a black sheep he actually was.
How much of it was an act?
Yeah, the Bin Ladens basically say, like, look, we didn't talk to Osama since he was a teenager, basically. He went off and did his own thing, and, he'd show up to family events sometimes, but we didn't know him. He was off doing his own thing. There's maybe evidence to suggest that he was closer to the family than that. Appearances at weddings, things like that maybe implied that he was a bit more within the fold.
Who is he? Ghislaine Maxwell appearing at...
Just showing up to people's weddings,
yeah.
uninvited. But so that's kind of like an open question. But, so he was the religious extremist scion of this incredibly wealthy Saudi Arabian family.
Where's Saudi Arabia in relation to this?
It is further west. If you go from Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq and Iran are both on the Persian Gulf. The land across from the Persian Gulf, sharing a border with Iraq, is Saudi Arabia. That's the peninsula there.
Okay.
Between Africa and the Middle East, the rest of the Middle East, is the Arabian Peninsula. And that's Saudi Arabia, Oman, Yemen, the UAE.
And then how did they end up getting involved?
The Saudis?
How did Osama and them end up getting involved with Afghanistan and all of that?
So Osama bin Laden started a group called Al-Qaeda. He was also trained as an anti-communist freedom fighter in the 80s by the U.S. but he was, I mean, I guess he was kind of Mujahideen, but he's not Afghani.
Mm-hmm.
But he started a group called Al-Qaeda, which is Arabic for the base.
All of these translations are much cooler than they should be.
I know. There's also now a white nationalist terrorist group called the Base that is...
In America?
In America. And I think they're leaders in Russia, and they're probably all feds in a lot of these groups. And they are named explicitly after Al-Qaeda because they see it as...
their version.
As their version of Al-Qaeda, because they believe that the American government needs to be taken down to be replaced with a white ethno-state, so they see themselves as being partnered, like enemy of my enemy is my friend relationship with Al-Qaeda.
I will add that, flash forward to the present time, a lot of people were sharing an image that showed the Taliban taking over the Afghanistan government and comparing it to the Capitol uprising, and I just think that's very offensive.
I think that's absurd.
People were getting, you know...
The Taliban
the
have taken control.
They've completely taken control, whereas the Capitol riot was very disturbing.
Disquieting imagery for sure.
They didn't succeed in their goal.
They're going to jail.
They're going to jail, and they're, you know,
they didn't have a plan.
The you know, mortality implications. It's just, you know,
incomparable.
It was a farce. It was serious, but it was a farce.
Yeah.
Compared to the real suffering that's going on right now.
It is a very classic example of what Karl Marx said in the 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon, the classic line that history happens twice. First is tragedy, second is farce. And it's a great example of, like, you know, the burning of the White House in 1812 was deeply scary and tragic. The Civil War was deeply scary and tragic. This is farcical. Doesn't mean it's not bad.
Wow.
But it is farcical.
It's farcical.
It's
popsicle
a
of farts.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
But so...
Bin Laden.
Yeah, so Bin Laden founded Al-Qaeda, and my understanding, I'm not an expert on the early years of Al-Qaeda, but I believe that they were moved around to whatever country would hold them, basically, would allow them to be there.
Okay.
The Taliban is ideologically aligned with Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
They are extremist Muslim terror groups,
in the 80s or 90s, they had control. They were running things.
The Taliban in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like, it wasn't like they had to hide Al-Qaeda. It was like, hey, come on in.
Exactly. And I mean, like, they did have to hide Al-Qaeda from, like, the international community, but they didn't have to hide within the country.
Yeah.
Because remember, Al-Qaeda and Bin Laden had been linked to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which is part of why people, like, even if you leave aside truther, 9/11 truth stuff, there were a lot of briefings, intelligence briefings about, like, what's Bin Laden going to do next in the U.S.
Okay.
And in fact, there was one that was like Bin Laden determined to strike U.S. and another one about using airplanes as projectiles.
So when people say Bush did it, a lot of people obviously think he was very active in it, but a lot of people think he did it by being passive and ignoring these warning signs.
Yeah.
So the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, that was a failure?
I believe a bomb went off.
Wow.
It just wasn't. It didn't take them down. It was like the Oklahoma City bombing. It was a land-based bomb. In fact, there's famously a line in the Notorious B.I.G.'s "Mo Money, Mo Problems," I believe, or maybe it's Juicy. In one of Biggie Smalls' songs, he says, "Blow up like the World Trade," and he died before 9/11.
Yeah.
So, like, that's
he
what
wasn't
he's
just
referring to.
psychic.
Yeah, that's what he's referring to.
That's why they had to kill him.
That's why they had to get it.
He knew too much.
So,
Bin Laden's hiding out in Afghanistan. Or he's hanging out in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
With the Taliban.
Mostly in a cave network called Tora Bora in the northern mountains of Afghanistan. And this is where he plans and executes 9/11. Is from there. So, 9/11 happens. Never forget.
Didn't.
It didn't happen.
No, I didn't forget. Sorry, yeah, that didn't sound like I was...
that 9/11 happened. And the U.S. basically immediately knows it's Bin Laden. Like within days, if not hours. Yeah. They basically figure out that it's Bin Laden. And so we also pretty much know where Bin Laden is. We know that he's last seen in Afghanistan because the CIA had trackers on him. Not
because they love him.
Because they think he's great. Well, they wanted to get the money back.
They're like,
Well, that was an old joke when Bush wanted to go to war against Iraq. was around DC. An old joke was, we know Saddam has weapons of mass destruction because we still have the receipts. Mm-hmm. He didn't though, so they had fake receipts, I guess. But so Bin Laden is in Afghanistan, and the U.S. goes to the Taliban, the government. It's the government of Afghanistan. And
It's
says,
not like sign. Yeah, they're just the government.
the Taliban is the ruling party of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
It'd be like saying that the U.S. goes to the Tories in
Yeah.
the U.K.
So they're like, knock knock.
They're like, come here, let's talk. I don't know what that character was. But so they go to the Taliban and they say, turn over Bin Laden. And the Taliban...
Bring out your Bin Laden.
Yeah. The Taliban says, like, look, we hate what happened to you. We think that sucks. If you can give us undeniable proof that it was Bin Laden, we'll turn him over. But until then, we're not.
Oof.
And so America said, like, all right, Eagle powers engage. 'Cause we're coming for him. And we invaded, took over the country pretty fast.
This was all to get Bin Laden.
At the start, yeah.
Which we allegedly got in what, like 2012 or something?
2011.
2011.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Entered in 2001, got him in 2011, exited in 2021.
Yikes.
So we go in, and we overthrow the Taliban government pretty much immediately, and they flee also to Tora Bora, the same like mountainous areas, and they say, okay, look, hey, okay, we'll figure out a way to get you Bin Laden. Their pitch is, we'll deliver him to a neutral third country. Mm-hmm. You'll get him from there.
Take him to Sweden.
Yeah, you'll get him from there, and then you guys will leave, and you'll allow us to come back in, basically. And George Bush said, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Suck an egg, Taliban. And I said no, basically, to that deal. So this all culminates in the Battle of Tora Bora, December 2001, when, according to the CIA chief on the ground, I believe I read this in, I want to say, a big Rolling Stone article from a few years ago, they were 8,000 men shy of capturing Bin Laden and ending the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda right there. But the way that the war in Afghanistan was being fought, basically the U.S. had been spoiled for a few decades. We hadn't had a land war with U.S. troops to a significant degree since Vietnam.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of similarities to the situation in Vietnam.
There are. The last real war we'd had was the Gulf War in 1991. But that was about, I want to say, 36 hours of fighting on behalf of U.S. troops.
Oh, wow.
That basically ended over a weekend. Partially because there was a very clear objective, which was Saddam Hussein is trying to take over Kuwait. Kuwait is a very small country that neighbors Iraq. We didn't want him to have Kuwait for two reasons. One, we say Kuwaiti independence, right? We're trying to stop imperial designs in the region. Also, Kuwait would have been Saddam Hussein's route to the sea. Iraq is landlocked. If they took over Kuwait, they would have access to the Persian Gulf, which has national security implications for everyone in the region, I guess. So we said, we're not going to let you do that. So American troops went in 1991 and just basically turned him around. Saddam backed down, said, all right, I won't do it. And he didn't. Kuwait's still an independent country. And all of the troops went home, and that was basically the Gulf War. And people at the time said, you should have gone all the way, marched to Baghdad, taken Saddam out, because he's not going to stop being a threat to the region, basically. But George Bush Sr., to his credit, said that's not our goal. So they left Iraq in 1991, and it was done. But so that was the last time that American troops really went into a foreign country. And a lot of the people planning Afghanistan thought it was going to be basically the same. That we'd sweep in, we'd knock the Taliban out, we'd get Bin Laden, and we'd be out before Christmas. People were literally saying, like, we'll be out before Christmas. And, we invaded in October.
Wow.
And the Battle of Tora Bora is where it became clear it was going to last a long time. So what happened is, because of how we've been fighting wars before, yes, in the Gulf, but more importantly in places like Somalia, Bosnia.
All the undeclared wars.
Exactly, these police actions we've been doing. A big thing that we would do is send in like a couple of guys, an A-team, basically, and otherwise rely on local forces, friendly local forces. This had the effect of that Americans, for the most part, didn't get hurt in these conflicts, so nobody cared in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so that's how we tried to fight Afghanistan too, was mostly rely on what was called the Northern Alliance of of friendly Afghan tribes, basically, to the U.S. and anti-Taliban groups. At Tora Bora, according to some of the national security people on the ground, including the CIA agent that was assigned to it, like I was saying, which, take anything the CIA says with a grain of salt, but, basically they were saying, if we just have 8,000 Army Rangers come in, which they could, like there were enough stationed within the region, they could helicopter over within a few hours, then we can basically route this entire thing. We can get all the way through this, get Bin Laden, end it. The Pentagon said that they weren't confident enough that Bin Laden was really there to do it. Now, evidence since suggests strongly that he was indeed there. And they didn't want to risk American lives any more than is necessary. In fact, there was a guy who is still pseudonymous, but he says that he was there on patrol, he was a ranger that was there, and that the combination of intelligence they had and the pinging of their whatevers, I don't know, he was like, I'm pretty sure I'm only a couple hundred yards away from Bin Laden right now. Like, right now. And he radioed in and said, like, let me move in, let me do it, I can get it right now.
Fuck.
And the CEOs were like, no, that's not our orders. We're supposed to let the Northern Alliance troops do it. We're not supposed to be risking American lives, so don't move, don't go. So,
I mean, maybe he would have died, but maybe he
he would have died a hero.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure a lot of those guys want to do.
Yeah.
Or at least are willing to do. That's what you signed up for.
Especially right after 9/11, it's like, let us
Yeah.
do this.
So they didn't, though, and Bin Laden crossed the border over into Pakistan, where he would live comfortably for the next 10 years. And the Taliban was scattered. Al-Qaeda was, I think Al-Qaeda still exists, but they were effectively taken out pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
The Taliban scatters, so now we're just there. We set up a new government in Kabul.
They cobble one together.
They cobble one together under Hamid Karzai, who was the head of one of the friendly tribes that helped in the Northern Alliance, basically. He was like already whipping up anti-Taliban forces before the war. So Hamid Karzai becomes the interim president in 2004. He's elected to a full term of president of Afghanistan. And then we just are there. We're basically, we've had generals now come out and say, like, I kept asking what we were doing, like what the goal was, and nobody had an answer. Like high-ranking military officers saying, like, I kept asking, what does victory look like here? And there was no answer. Just, we got to continue the mission.
I mean, and the fact that Bin Laden wasn't even there. So it's like, it stops being about Bin Laden at all.
Ostensibly, the idea was to replace the Taliban government with a Western-friendly democracy, bring Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda to justice, and prevent Afghanistan from being a haven for other terrorist activities. Those were the stated goals. They didn't happen really for a long time.
And meanwhile, what was going on with our relationships with Iraq and Iran? Like, it's
this
so
is a big
confusing.
Part of the problem. A big part of the problem. So the Taliban is briefly scattered. This is 2001. 2003, the Taliban reconstitutes itself. And they start gathering support, all in the hinterlands, all in the outside provinces. It's important to remember, while we are grieving for the Afghan people right now, which we ought to be, the Taliban had a lot of popular support. There's a lot of people in Afghanistan that support the Taliban. But so, the 2003, they're gaining strength again. And do you know what else happens in 2003?
I was on Neopets.
Right, and that was a national tragedy that we were too distracted by trying to figure out to help. We invade Iraq in 2003. So at the same time that the Taliban is regrouping and regaining strength, regaining popularity, America decides we don't really need to worry about this anymore. We're going to shift focus over to Iraq.
And taking the government knowingly taking advantage of Islamophobia and everyone's fear of terror by just putting a blanket, like,
and by just lying.
By
lying and saying that Saddam Hussein, the Taliban, and Al-Qaeda were all connected. They were not. The Taliban is harboring Al-Qaeda. Saddam has nothing to do with the other one.
Wow.
Saddam was not a terribly religious leader.
He was more political, right? Or militarized.
Yeah, he was a Ba'athist, which is a vaguely socialist, like Arab nationalist.
Okay. Because I remember, like, was it like the big statue of Saddam that fell?
Yeah, he was a nationalist, basically. That was
Okay.
his big thing.
Because when I was a kid, it just felt like he was, you know, interchangeable with Bin Laden. Like, it was just like the big bad guys.
He and Bin Laden didn't like each other. They were enemies of each other.
Wow.
Because Iraq was not a Islamic theocratic dictatorship, which is what Bin Laden wanted.
Wow.
Iraq was a different kind of dictatorship. It wasn't a theocracy. Even like Iran is a theocracy. Iraq is not. Iraq and Iran are not friendly with each other. So Saddam Hussein, one of the reasons that Iraq really fell apart after Saddam Hussein left is that he wasn't a theocrat in this way, which meant that the Sunni and the Shia and the Kurds were all basically held in stasis
Okay.
in Iraq. Now these are three groups. I mean, the Shia and the Sunni are explicitly just religious groups. The Kurds are an ethnic group, but they don't like each other. Saddam Hussein was basically keeping them from fighting each other by having a schismatic government ruling over it. Like Iran is a Shia theocracy. Iran is Shiite. If you're a Sunni, you're not fully Iranian there. You take, let's say, Afghanistan is now a Sunni theocracy. Shia are not allowed. But Hussein was neither, I think that he was personally Sunni, I think, but he was neither Sunni nor Shia in terms of governance. So these two factions were at an uneasy peace. And the Kurds as well, although he was also probably doing light genocides against the Kurds. But it prevented the country from falling into civil war, which is the key thing. So what happens is the U.S. decides that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. This is based on false information from a British spy. It's just not true. And the UN went in to investigate. They didn't get the full access, whatever. Eventually, the U.S. decides to go in, overthrow Saddam.
Was this the whole weapons of mass destruction thing?
Yes.
WMDs?
They weren't there.
Okay.
None at all.
And that was the thing, is that the Bush administration was very clearly like, we need to act on this now. They're WMDs.
Yes. It was very tied in with a kind of forgotten element of this saga, which was the 2001 anthrax attack.
Oh, yeah.
Now we know pretty firmly that that was not connected to Muslim terror at all.
But there was such a...
People thought it was.
Yeah.
And it tied in with the WMDs thing, because the WMDs argument is a lot of hinting. A lot of like, oh, maybe this, maybe that. Nothing very
There
firm.
could be.
And one of it...
And everyone's just scared shitless after 9/11,
Exactly.
so...
And then these anthrax attacks happen. And what... Oh.
Would the term Muslim terror, is that an okay term to use?
I mean, I would say probably Islamic terror.
Yeah.
Because it's... I don't know, that just feels the phrase that I hear more often.
Okay.
But so, after these anthrax attacks in 2001, the Saddam Hussein government was heavily implied to be making chemical and biological weapons as their part of their WMD program.
And this was that people were being sent... Who were being sent the anthrax?
A lot of senators, I believe, primarily.
Someone died from it, right?
A journalist died. Yeah, journalists and senators. The person who has been basically tried in absentia is a doctor from the NIH, I believe, named Bruce Ivins, who was an anthrax researcher himself.
I think there's a documentary on Netflix about this.
Yeah,
Or something.
there's a lot of questions about this.
Yeah.
It's not at all certain that Bruce Ivins was the person that did it.
Yeah, it could just be a fall guy. I mean, it could be an inside thing of like, let's just send anthrax to people so we have another excuse to
Could be any number of things, yeah.
drum up the fear.
Or it could be Bruce Ivins, like who knows?
Yeah.
But it's very uncertain right now. But so that's a kind of a forgotten part of the lead up to Iraq. Was like, Saddam could have done that. You know what I mean? Like, who knows? He's making these weapons of mass destruction. What are you gonna do?
And then where does the tie-in with oil come in?
Oh, well, Afghanistan and Iraq are both incredibly oil-rich states. And so the idea was that if there's an American puppet government in control of both of these countries, then a lot of their oil revenue can come to the U.S.
Okay, cool. Not cool, but...
No, yeah.
And then, of course, all of these people in the government are tied financially to these weapons
Oh,
companies.
Cheney's
and
job before he was vice president was the CEO of Halliburton, which is a company that's heavily involved in all this stuff.
So all these conflicts of interest, all of these,
Big time.
I mean, a big thing I remember from the 2000s, growing up in the war on terror would be like teachers, complaining about oil, and then seeing bumper stickers of Bush lied, people died,
Right.
and then, just a lot of...
Or nobody died when Clinton lied was another one that I've seen.
Oh, yeah.
So we go in to overthrow Saddam pretty quickly.
In Iraq.
In Iraq. And the thing about oil is because Saddam was a nationalist, he was not interested in selling his oil.
And wasn't the...
Owners were nationalists.
It wasn't the idea of... this was also tied in with the idea of all these people are so oppressed here. Right?
Yeah, and this is something that ties into the current debate about this.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to hear and have surely heard the cries to be deeply concerned about the people of Afghanistan right now. The women, the children that are being oppressed, the Cape folks, everything like that. We should be very concerned about this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also worth remembering that these same calls to action were a big part of why we got there in the first place, and they were disingenuous then.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a disingenuousness to some of the people saying it now as well. There was a humanitarian element of the arguments to go into Afghanistan and Iraq, that these people are oppressed, they're repressed.
Is there an idea that people in Iraq felt oppressed by Saddam Hussein?
Yes.
But even though he wasn't a religious extremist...
But he was still a dictator.
He was still a
a
dictator.
very authoritarian country.
Okay. So people still
But it's based
lived
on a
in
flawed...
fear of their lives.
Yeah,
People
and
still...
the thing is, it's not that those things aren't true. It's not that people don't get oppressed in these places. It's that the idea that justifies intervention is based on a flawed premise of that the U.S. can unilaterally fix it. We cannot. We
and
cannot
that
fix
people, once they're given a taste of the American way and pants, that they're gonna just completely...
It's this assumption that everybody is just like Americans, basically, and they're just waiting to be given it.
The white savior.
Yeah. You would hear this, like, part of the reason why there was no exit strategy for Iraq, it's a famous phrase, there's no exit strategy in Iraq, was in large part, I mean, if you want to get really, really cynical, you can say it because they never intended to leave. They just want to control the revenues from the oil streams and the other stuff there. Let American companies have access to the oil there.
Yeah.
But the stated reason is even stupider, which is that Bush and Rumsfeld and all them literally said, well, we'll be greeted as liberators when we get there. We're going to get there and the Iraqi people will be so glad that Saddam's gone that we're golden. There won't be an exit strategy. We'll just head out. We'll set them up. It'll be great. It'll be done.
I mean, I do remember in the news when the Saddam statue fell, it was like, look, all these people are so happy. They've been liberated.
And I'm sure many of them were. But the problem was there was nothing to take its place. And Iraq is in a worse position than Afghanistan is right now. We don't really talk about it.
They still are in a worse. Because I know that the U.S. government was pretty scorched earth with Iraq.
Iraq effectively doesn't exist as a country right now. And it's not just because of the U.S. government. It's because, I mean, it is, but not as directly. When Saddam was gone, the country fell into a civil war that's never stopped. And that's where ISIS came out of, was the civil war in Iraq and Syria.
And we were withholding of, what's the term? It's like rations or aid. What's the...
Yeah.
we did a lot of sanctions.
A lot of sanctions.
So that they couldn't run as a government. Like, it was like you...
Once
you
ISIS
can't even
took over
sustain
a lot
yourself.
of it, yeah. And like Afghanistan, we basically tried to set up a puppet government in Baghdad. But these governments that we try to set up, they don't have any popular support. Because a lot of people are glad that the people are gone, but now they're glad the U.S. is gone. Like, they don't want us there either.
Yeah.
And basically with these countries, you pretty much either have to formally colonize it or leave them to their own devices. And colonizing is bad, so they should be left to their own devices. And Iraq is a nightmare place right now. Like, I know that ISIS got beat back a little bit. At least it's not in the news every day anymore. Although now it is, because they're back in Afghanistan.
But I thought Trump beat ISIS.
Oh, but you know who helped us fight ISIS in Iraq? Al-Qaeda.
Oh my god.
Yeah, there were soldiers that refused to go fight in Iraq right now because they're like, I'm not fighting alongside Al-Qaeda. It's just not happening. It's absolutely not happening. And then up in Kurdistan, which is the northern part of Iraq, because they're being asked to fight alongside Al-Qaeda. So up in the north in Kurdistan, well, what would be Kurdistan, has been the Kurds fighting ISIS. And that's where a lot of leftist, communist militias have joined up with the Kurds. That's like where Brace Belden fought.
Oh, wow.
Was in the northern part of Iraq.
Oh, yeah,
against
because
ISIS.
the Kurds were basically getting genocided. And,
Groups like the YPG and others were like, some of them explicitly Marxist-Leninists, some of them anarchist, but all of them against the terror movements, basically, were fighting as well.
Wow.
And so that was all happening, and we basically turned away from Afghanistan. And that was when the Taliban started regaining its lost power and popularity.
All these young people that grew up in the war on terror as well.
Yeah.
People our age, you know.
People that, they wouldn't use this example because they don't like American pop culture, but they see themselves as the Luke Skywalker, and that we're the Empire. Their farmhouse gets burned down. Some guy shows up and says, hey, embrace this ancient religion and it'll give you the power you need to fight back. So they do, and they go and blow up whatever they can.
Yeah.
We all get why it happens when it's in Star Wars, but everyone gets really confused when it happens in real life. But so it's becoming a big shit show. And then in 2011, May 2nd, I believe, 2011, the Obama administration announces that Bin Laden has been found and killed. So it turns out Osama Bin Laden had been living on a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. The CIA says that they found him by intercepting a courier. Basically, there was no electronic communication to Bin Laden, nothing that could be intercepted. But there was a guy, a messenger, that they basically were able to find out was going to this place and that he had been with Bin Laden in Tora Bora. So they're like, okay, this is a guy that works with Bin Laden. And then from aerial surveillance of the compound, like satellite surveillance, they were like, there is a third family that lives in this compound, this heavily fortified compound. We don't know why it's heavily fortified. It's got huge walls, armed patrols. We don't know what it is. But there is a third family that's unaccounted for that matches Bin Laden's family. So that's how they're like, that's how we got him. And then they went in with some Blackhawks. One of them got crashed and left behind in Pakistan. One of the Black Hawk helicopters. I actually don't know if the guy died. I think he evacuated. I don't think anybody died. Any Americans died in the raid on Bin Laden. But so yeah, the official version, the CIA version, is that they actually weren't 100% certain it was Bin Laden until they came in and got him. But they did.
They're like, if it wasn't him, we would just kill him anyway.
And just not tell anybody about it.
Exactly.
And hope that Pakistan didn't notice. And then, it was Operation Geronimo was the name of the operation. They got him. And then they ID'd him, dropped his body in the ocean, got the fuck out of there. Research from Cy Hirsch, the radical journalist who uncovered the My Lai massacre, suggests that may not be the story.
Yeah.
Not anything hugely different. Like, he says that Bin Laden is dead. The U.S. got him in Abbottabad. But
not necessarily buried at sea, stuff like that.
His sources suggest that it was a high-ranking Pakistani military official who came in and gave a tip, basically. And that Pakistan knew and was more involved.
Like Pakistan was maybe okay with it?
Yeah.
Because, wouldn't it maybe trigger a war with Pakistan? Like, to just go in and do that?
Not necessarily. Pakistan, I don't think that... They wouldn't have the international support. They probably don't have... they have nukes, but they probably don't have the military. And they're too busy trying to kill Indian people in Kashmir.
Yeah.
While Indian people are trying to kill them. That may be the case. I don't know. I think that it makes sense on some level that could be the case. I also do think it makes sense that Pakistan would not be involved.
Yeah.
Because Pakistan had been harboring Bin Laden. They knew he was there. Cy Hirsch's argument is that he'd actually been on house arrest from the Pakistani government there. The official version is that we didn't tell Pakistan because we thought that they would tip him off.
Yeah.
And again, that could be true.
Yeah.
Pakistan is not a friendly government to the U.S. Not terribly friendly.
Yeah.
We're on India's side of that conflict as a country. And that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah. I wanted to get into then Libya, and I was like, that I can't even.
Yeah, we're already at an hour. Like, there's
so much.
But so we got Bin Laden, and he died, and he's dead to this very day. But we were still there for 10 more years. Not really sure what we were doing.
Because the mission was no longer, once Bin Laden left Afghanistan, the mission wasn't about him anymore.
Well,
that was a separate mission.
And the idea of making Afghanistan a place that wouldn't be a safe haven for terrorists is so open-ended, it's an impossible thing to do.
Yeah.
But so last year, Trump made a deal with the Taliban. Trump met up with the Taliban.
Yeah, but even though the Taliban were still sort of on the remote outskirts. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were starting to take over more land by that point.
That was the way the wind was blowing.
The official president of Afghanistan was Ashraf Ghani, who, he fled the country pretty quick. I believe his son or daughter is married to Elizabeth Warren's legislative advisor, which is funny.
That's so bizarre.
A lot of the high-ranking U.S. allied people in the Middle East were, like, educated in the U.S.,
Yeah.
So, Trump made a deal with the Taliban, which was a very controversial thing to do. And
I don't really remember that happening.
It was not huge news, because most people forgot we were even still at war with Afghanistan.
Yeah.
It was briefly news because he was going to meet with them at Camp David. He was going to bring the Taliban to the U.S.
Oh my God.
Meet with them at Camp David, September 11th of last year. And that was when
Trump
it was
is
briefly
such
news.
a freaking flashy drama bitch.
I know. But they didn't do that, but they did still end up meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And they struck a deal, which I remember this briefly. I do remember a little bit of this happening, but I didn't take too much stock in it because I didn't think it was going to happen.
Yeah.
But they've set a deal to basically get everybody out by, I believe, September 11th of this year, to get all American troops out.
Wow.
Biden comes in, and he basically has the option to either
nix that deal or...
which would mean escalating the war in Afghanistan.
Yeah, because they had an agreement.
Yeah, or go along with it. He asked for, or I think it was supposed to be that everyone's going to be out by May 1st, and Biden asked for more time until September 11th. They agreed on August 31st, which is still the deadline.
What's the point of even making an agreement with the Taliban?
Well, the idea would be that they wouldn't be attacking and killing the Americans as they're fleeing.
Which they're still doing, or they did in Kabul. Well, the
Taliban's
agreement was you can kill your own people, but don't kill us as we.
Well,
leave.
also don't kill them as we're there, basically, because the Taliban.
We'll leave, and then you can do whatever you want.
Kind of, yeah.
Jesus.
The Taliban has not been as violent as they could be right now. They are not letting people leave, but there hasn't been mass killings until these ISIS bombings, which is the beginning now of a new thing. Also, apparently there was a U.S. airstrike, I believe today, that killed a bunch of civilians in Kabul. So that's the point, by the way, of all this, and why we need to get out, because we just can't do this. We're not good at this. There's no...
Fuck.
We've had 4 different presidents with 4 different approaches come at this issue.
Different approaches. Yeah.
Well, the only approaches that are acceptable in U.S. politics.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to have Ralph Nader become president.
Yeah. And I've definitely thought a lot about, Bernie was always talking about pulling out of Afghanistan, and to think about what that would...
He would have been saddled with this. He probably would have been fucking court-martialed.
Yeah, and just to be somebody that's so anti-conflict. If you were a Nader, or if you were a Bernie, just what would you do in the face of... It's an interesting thought experiment just because we're so far from that ever happening.
And I mean, the answer is you basically you have to do what it seemed like Biden was doing at first, which is just biting the bullet. Mm-hmm. It's irreparably broken at this point.
Yeah.
There's nothing we can do to fix it that is within the realms of acceptable American politics right now.
And it doesn't seem like there's any real plan and structure to help refugees or anything.
No. See, that, at this point, to me, getting out of Afghanistan cleanly is a lost cause.
Yeah.
And I think it's been a lost cause for a long time, like I was saying. But so that means to me the moral responsibility shifts away from trying to fix Afghanistan, which we could never do to begin with,
Yeah.
and towards the fact that we need to get as many Afghans out of that country and here.
As many that don't
as
want to
we
be
can.
there.
As many as want to leave. Yeah.
Yeah, which,
as possible. And, they always say, like, well, what if we accidentally bring terrorists back? And it's just like
They always say that. Like, it's just like,
it never happens.
Yeah.
It never happens. What's the last...
they're like, if we let the Mexicans cross the border,
Yeah.
there could be the cartels. It's like, if those people want to commit violence, they're going to do it. Like...
Yeah, most of the terrorism that happens here is white supremacist in the U.S. The only Muslim terror attack, I think, in the U.S. since, like, 9/11, pretty much, that was successful, was the Pulse nightclub shooting.
Yeah.
And it's like...
And that was an American, right? Or he was an immigrant.
I mean, he certainly lived here.
Yeah.
Like...
a Floridian.
Yeah, that was his main problem. But so, to me, just the possibility, and also a lot of these foiled FBI terrorist things, I don't know about them.
I was reminded of... Or no.
I was saying, I think that a lot of them are basically, from what I've seen, like the Christmas tree bombing that was thwarted in Portland, a lot of them is Afghanistan, or the FBI basically entrapping and leading along Muslim teenagers.
Yeah, I mean...
up to the point of doing it and then being like, ha, we got you.
I don't remember which documentary on Netflix it was. It may have been like the Spycraft one or something where it's where they, something where they talk about the anthrax stuff, I think. And there was also an episode or something where they talk about, sort of turning Americans into this like American woman, getting her to flirt with a terrorist leader, and then she falls like in love with him, and she like and they fly her there, and she just ends up joining them. Like they don't, she doesn't, she stops being a spy for the U.S. because she's like, I believe in this cause. So they just, and she has successfully like helped do some bombings and stuff.
We have this myth of
an American
omnipresence and omniscience, where we really think that American military intelligence can do anything. Mm-hmm. And the left falls prey to this too. Yeah. We tend to see the CIA behind everything. Yeah. It's like, no, the CIA is no bungler as much as every other part of the U.S. government. Yeah. But we have to take them more seriously than the mainstream does, which acts like they're great. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, like, most of these anti-terror projects are basically just starting terrorist attacks and then stopping. You know what I mean? Like, we're not really catching people. We're always fighting yesterday's war. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact that we still take our shoes off at the airport because one guy tried to put a bomb in his shoes 20 years ago, it didn't even work. But it's like, whoever's going to be the next guy that tries to do that isn't going to be putting him in his shoes. Once that part's been spoiled, they're not going to do it anymore. Yep. And so we're not trying to proactively fight these things, at least not publicly. And so the whole risk of terror from letting in Afghan refugees, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. Yeah, and even if there were some that got over, I don't buy it.
And extremists and fundamentalists, they always exist, are always going to exist, but I think it's very clear that they also can be created. Yeah. And the U.S. government gives a really good argument for becoming against us.
Yeah, I think it's very, very clear that our presence in that region is creating more terrorists than preventing them or killing them. Yeah. And so that alone means that whatever lumps we have to take to get out, we need to take. And we need to focus on getting out the people that want to leave and getting them to safety.
Yeah, and it's very similar to, Central America, like other secret wars where, people are displaced or people are living in incredibly violent regions because of wars that we started. Yeah. And it's like but so many anti-immigration people are like, it's not our business. And it's like, no, it is. It's our moral...
It's also literally our business.
Yeah. And it's our moral imperative to...
Yeah. I mean, I think in the 50s, in the mid-century at least, the famous short book that I have on my shelf by Major General Smedley Butler.
Smedley Butler?
Yeah.
Smelly Butler?
Yep. It's a book called War is a Racket. And he was a Marine Corps.
Everything's
Major General.
a racket.
Yeah. And he basically says, like, not just is that war is fake, it's not just that it's stupid, but it's like, I've just been killing people to open up new markets for American businesses my entire life. He's like, that's been my entire career. And it's been a waste. Basically, like, there's no point. There's been basically one war worth fighting in the past 150 years. Maybe two, like the Civil War and World War II.
He was a, what was he?
He was a Major General in the Marine Corps.
I mean, a lot of
And
people that,
some of the
have done
strongest
that.
anti-imperialists are veterans.
Yeah.
Smedley Butler was also the person who dimed on the business plot against Franklin Roosevelt when a bunch of prominent U.S. businessmen wanted to overthrow Roosevelt and install a military dictatorship.
Because of the New Deal and
Because
stuff.
of the New Deal and the anti-business stuff. Basically wanted to install a fascist-style dictatorship. The person that they had picked was a very popular orator named Smedley Butler. And they went to him.
To take over?
Yeah, and he was like, no, I think that's actively bad. And then Smedley went to Congress, and I was like, hey, all these people just came to me.
That's my favorite Frank Capra movie, Smedley Goes to Congress.
And Congress was like, I don't know if you're telling the truth or not, but if you are, nobody do that again, basically. They couldn't, like, verify what he was saying.
Yeah, they're like, you capitalists.
But it was people like, I think Henry Ford, like, it was very prominent
All those
people.
business people that were probably also Nazis. All those
Henry
guys.
Ford was a Nazi.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's all of them. Wow.
Yeah, so the stance of this podcast, anti-imperial, anti-war, pro the Afghan people, pro oppressed peoples everywhere, anti-overthrowing FDR for a fascist dictator.
Well, I do feel like, I have a much greater understanding of the region, at least our involvement.
Yeah.
But wow, there's still so much that is...
You're right, we didn't touch on Libya. You're right about that. I mean, we haven't talked about Syria, Assad in Syria.
Yeah, and I think that it's, like a thing we talk about a lot. I think the government is happy to confuse the American public.
Oh, I love it.
They love it. They love, the fact that it's always like, this person's still wearing a burqa. Like, it's like there's just no...
You just can't trust any of that.
Yeah, and where the fact that just 2 months ago everything was about Israel, and now in Palestine, now we're not even talking about it. And
I think most people listening to this, maybe not listening to this because our friends are nerds, I think most people in the U.S., our friends and listeners are nerds, couldn't name the current Prime Minister of Israel after all that.
Yeah.
Do you know his name?
The one that just started after Netanyahu?
Yeah.
I don't remember his name. I knew it for a moment.
Naftali Bennett.
Yeah. And isn't he said something like, I've killed lots of Palestinians and it's okay.
Probably.
He said, like, it doesn't keep me up at night. It was like, okay, thank you.
Very, very cool.
Great.
Yeah, we haven't talked about Israel-Palestine. We haven't talked about India and Pakistan, which India and Pakistan is... I think there's two regions in the world that if there's going to be a World War III, where they're going to come from. And that's Kashmir, which is what India and Pakistan are fighting over, or Taiwan.
Wow.
Which is the remnants of the pre-Mao Chinese government.
We'll have to do an episode on that.
Yeah, they run Taiwan, the Republic of China. And the U.S., although we do recognize the current government of China as the government of China, we also have promised we've promised Taiwan its independence.
Yeah.
But I don't...
We make a lot of promises.
Yeah, that I think is going to be a major turning point in the rise of China as a world hegemon. Yeah. Probably alongside the U.S. for a long time, is when China inevitably calls our bluff on that, and we do not go to war over Taiwan. I can't see us going to war over Taiwan. And at some point, China's going to call that bluff. They want that island. It's a big island. And they think it's theirs. They think that that's an illegitimate fake government ruling a part of their territory. Which, who decides what's a fake government and what isn't? That's the question.
That is the question.
So, I think that we should sign off.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we should end on a positive note because you just ended on the next Civil War or the next big World War III is gonna be.
You got a positive note?
World War Z.
I got a positive note.
Okay.
Finally, big surprise, big unveiling. Kanye West has released Donda.
Oh,
today.
I saw. I
His
was like,
newest
"Donde
record.
está?"
Yeah. Apparently, it's named for his mom. Her name was Donda West.
Oh, fuck.
Um,
Okay.
But I made the same joke. But I haven't listened to it yet, but by all accounts, it's much stronger than his last couple. So we're all glad to hear it. I do wish it didn't feature such artists as Marilyn Manson and DaBaby, which I just found out today.
I definitely thought you were gonna say R. Kelly, but that's.
No.
I feel like you could combine Marilyn Manson and DaBaby and get sort of a.
Yeah.
Wow, Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
What is this? The
Kanye is fully...
Hot Topic, the Nightmare Before Christmas covers soundtrack. What is this?
Kanye is fully Joker-fied. He's inviting all the canceled artists.
Wow. I mean, he must be really happy that Bill Cosby's out of jail.
That's our end.
That's our
positive
positive
note.
note. Our anti
Our prison abolitionist.
prison
stance.
abolitionist stance. Oh, apparently a prison is using that like horse medicine on its inmates that have COVID.
Ivermectin.
Yeah.
That's the horse medicine that Brett Weinstein keeps trying
Who's Brett Weinstein?
to sell, not sell, but promote. He's the guy. He's like an intellectual dark web guy he's the guy that was fired from Evergreen for not wanting to stay home on a day that they decided that white people would stay home, and he's like a biologist or something, but now he has a podcast called like Dark Horse with Brett Weinstein.
Everything's horse themed.
Yeah, and apparently he's been big on ivermectin and down on vaccines.
Oh, well, speaking of, so his name was Brett Weinstein.
Yeah.
Another positive thing, Brett Goldstein
Oh yeah.
is played.
Ted Lasso.
On Ted Lasso. He plays
Roy Kent.
the guy that's like, can you do the voice?
No.
He's like,
Okay, I'll try. What are you fucking doing?
That's good.
Play better fucking football.
And then Keely's like, love it when you like this. Whatever.
All right.
So, he wrote the most recent episode of Ted Lasso. Not everybody's favorite show, and then a lot of people, their ultimate favorite show.
Yeah. I like it. I really like it.
At first I didn't get it, and then, because I just saw like an episode out of order, then I watched it all, and it was really sweet and funny. It's good to watch with subtitles, because there's a lot of, like, quick jokes you might miss.
Yeah, and plus, two countries divided by a common language. The U.S. and the UK.
It's true. And we started listening to Brett Goldstein's podcast called like Movies to Bury You With or To Be Buried With. So that's a fun recommendation. And also our friend works at McConnell's ice cream shop. Mm-hmm. And this weekend, this weekend they did a Ted Lasso promotion where they gave you free biscuits from the show in the cute little pink boxes. So we just had a lot of fun. We ate so many biscuits. So shout out to our friend Kelly shout out and to Apple TV Plus, not a sponsor of us, and I wouldn't recommend them for anything else.
Yeah, but if they want to give us money, I would recommend them strongly.
I would recommend
watch Mr. Corman.
No, please don't watch.
Show.
Just listen to Mr. McCormick.
Hello!
See you.
That is a good positive note to end on.
Yeah, eat cookies, eat biscuits.
Eat cookies, free Cosby.
No! Free cookies.
Oh, I got it wrong. I
You
did
got
the
it
wrong
wrong.
one.
Free cookies.
Somebody find him. Put him back.
Wear a mask. Make a cookie hole for the mask.
Yep. Get your jab.
Get your jab, and good night.
And good luck.